It's finally warming up outside and I'm getting so excited for spring. I put together a compilation of some beautiful and unique spring DIYs that you're definitely going to want to try out. Hey there, it's Donna. I'm so happy to have you joining me today. Let's get crafting. I have these natural twig nests that I picked up from my local dollar store. It came with a cute little egg. It's a styrofoam egg. I decided I wanted to paint it because I wasn't crazy about the white color. I wanted to create a robin's egg look. Now you can make your own bird's nest. I do have a tutorial on how you can create your home. I will have that link down in the description box for you. I decided I wanted to use this beautiful teacup to place this little bird's nest inside. I am going to use hot glue. It did not damage the teacup in any way, so if you're concerned about that, this is a safe option. If you want it permanent, I would definitely use something like E6000. I have got all these little scraps of some faux greenery in my stash, and I thought this was a great way to use up some of those little bits. They're left over from some previous projects. I did get these greenery and florals from Dollar Tree. They kind of have a nice, beautiful spring meadow look to them. I love using them for all kinds of different projects. So I had this teacup in my stash for a very long time, and I'm like, oh, it's so pretty. I've seen this craft on Pinterest before, and I thought this would be a great opportunity to give that project a try. So I'm just gonna add little snippets of the greenery all the way around on the inside around the nest, and then I'm gonna go ahead and add some florals to this as well. You can add all kinds of different things. Some dried florals would be really pretty as well. But since I had all these little bits in my stash already, I thought this was a great way to use them up. The paint has dried on the little egg, so I'm going to add that into the nest now. And I felt like it looked a little lonely sitting in there, so I'm going to go ahead and add just a few little pieces of some of my greenery and the florals in around the egg on the inside of the nest. I was also thinking you could add some really cute little feathers to this as well. I thought that would be a fun little touch. Maybe even a little bit of grass or maybe some Spanish moss too, just to create a really natural look if you would like to do so. I'm just going to stick with my greenery and some pretty little florals. Now, one thing I do absolutely love to do is add branches to my project. I think it just creates a more natural look. So I decided to just take some little pieces of branches and hot glue them into place in around the bird's nest. I'm also going to stick a few right directly into the nest, just like you would see a bird's nest built into a tree amongst the branches. It creates a really, really cool look. Once that's done, I decided I'm going to use this beautiful, fun spring ribbon as my hanger. I've got two different widths here. The wider one, I am going to tie it onto the handle, and then I'm going to tie the two strands together in a knot, and that will create my hanger. You can hang this on a doorknob or on a hook on your wall or on a cupboard, wherever you'd like. Just going to tie that into a simple knot. And then I decided, I'm like, it's just needs a little bit more here. So I'm going to add a little bow with the skinnier ribbon that I had that matched my hanger. It's so pretty, isn't it? I have a real thing for bird's nests for springtime. How do you feel about them? Let me know down in the comment section. Also, would love to know the different craft projects that you have made using bird's nests. I love to be inspired by your suggestions. This was such an easy project to put together, and I think it's going to be beautiful as a gift for somebody or just to use as your spring decor. I have these butterflies in my stash for quite a while now. I wanted to try using them. Usually I use birds for my spring projects, but I'm like, you know what? Let's try a butterfly this time. I decided to tone down this bright blue using some of that sea spray blue. It's kind of like a robin's egg blue paint, and I'm just gonna add a bit to this butterfly. Again, I just needed to tone down that really bright blue color because it wasn't gonna work for the project that I've got. But I also wanted to use up some supplies that I have in my stash. So I painted the top and the bottom of the butterfly, just removing a little bit of the paint off of the black, just so the image still shows through, the definition of the butterfly still shows through. So I'm gonna allow that to dry. I got this pretty silver plated goblet from the thrift store. It was only $1. I needed to remove that price tag. Next, I've got this piece of scrap dry floral foam. I'm adding some glue to the contact points of the foam and putting that into place. Next, I'm using some Spanish moss. Now, the thing I find with Spanish moss, it actually creates kind of a bird's nest look when you gather it around your foam in a container such as this. It's really pretty touch. Added just a little gob of hot glue here and there to help hold that into place. Now, as you can see, I'm using those scraps of some greenery, again, leftover from some previous projects. It's the same greenery that I was using before. They are seriously one of my favorite greenery to use for springtime. They are so beautiful. Let me know if you know, does Dollar Tree still have them? I haven't been into my store lately, so I'm not sure if they still carry this type of greenery and florals. So let me know, and others know. It would be great to know if they do have them still. So the key to this is that you want to pretend that with your floral foam, you're pointing all your stems towards the middle of that foam, and it'll create a nice balanced look. Again, I am adding some twigs. I find that adding twigs just brings it to another level. It really makes a difference, especially if you do love to bring nature inside. This is a great way to do so, and it just makes your arrangements look so beautiful and more natural looking. I'm just adding some pieces here and there, and again, pretending like I'm sticking it towards the center of my floral foam. I removed the clip off of the back of the butterfly. I'm going to figure out where I want to place it, add some hot glue, put it into place, and that is it. This project was so simple, so beautiful. Again, would make a great gift, especially since Mother's Day is coming up. I think this would be a beautiful gift to receive as a mom. This is a great recycling project, especially if you like to collect jars. I've got this jar that's all cleaned up, and I'm going to give it a coat of some gesso. Now, if you haven't used gesso before, gesso is a primer that artists use on their canvases or other substrates to prep the surface for paint. It works great for your craft projects as well, such as glass or any shiny surface. I gave it 2 coats of the gesso. This is the Artist Loft brand. It's a nice, smooth consistency. I recently got this beautiful spring napkin from a store called Ninny's Napkins online. It's an online craft store. I'm going to just cut it down to size. Now, if your jar is big enough, you might be able to wrap your napkin all the way around, but my napkin was too big. So first though, I needed to prep it by removing the back layers off of the main design of your napkin. Next, I wanted to just outline around the images that I wanted to use using a thin paintbrush and some water. This is a great way to tear away any of the images that you want to use on tissue paper or napkins. As I said before, my napkin was just way too big for my jar, so I couldn't wrap it around and make it look nice. It looked really weird, so I'm like, you know what, I'm just gonna do it this way, and it works really well. So if you're using tissue paper, you could probably just wrap all your tissue paper around your jar. That would be totally fine. But this worked well for me. So now I'm just going to figure out the placement. And as I was doing that, I'm like, oh man, there is a real color difference between the napkin and the gesso. So I decided to go in and add some cream craft paint and gave it just 1 coat of the craft paint. That helped tone down the really bright white, and it blended in better with the color of the napkin. You can see it's so much better. So now I'm gonna, again, just figuring out the placement of my images for my jar. I wanted the bird's nest to be a main feature for my project. So I have got one going on the front of the jar and then another one on the back. I'm using some decoupaged glue. I'm using the Craft Smart brand. Of course, you can use Mod Podge. I prefer this brand over Mod Podge. I don't know, for some reason I find Mod Podge remains really tacky here where I live, but it depends on where you are and whatever type of glue you like to use. So add a coat underneath your napkin, press your napkin into place, and then you want to go over the top. Be very careful here. Napkins are, of course, very, very delicate, so they tear very easily. So I was being very gentle with applying my decoupage. Even with how gentle I was being, I still ended up tearing the napkin a little bit. I overworked some of the areas a little too much. Oops. But it still looked fine. You couldn't even really tell where I tore the napkin. The other thing is too, I don't mind the wrinkles that show. If that bothers you, there are lots of different techniques on how to apply napkins or tissue paper for decoupage. Another thing is there's been a few people say, why do I say decoupage? Well, decoupage is a French word and that's how it's pronounced. So I'm in Canada, and so that's how I find a lot of people pronounce it. I know there's some people that say decoupage, I think it is, but I say decoupage. So anyways, either way, it's both the same. So I'm just going to go ahead here and add some of the pussy willow images as well, and that's actually going to be a key design for this, as I am adding some pussy willows to the next step of this project. The jar is all nice and dry. It looks beautiful. I have these faux pussy willows, and I've had them in my stash for quite a while. I picked them up at a store called Dollarama here in Canada. I was being very careful here. The wire, oh man, it was stiff and really strong, but I wanted to create kind of like a wreath around the rim of the jar. So I managed to get one into a wreath form, and then I was trying to just kind of weave some of this in and out to create a wreath shape. And then I'm going to press it over the top around the rim of my jar. I did scrape off some of the paint here, but you're not going to see it, so it's okay. But now at this point, I'm like, okay, this was getting too difficult to do. So I decided just to add them straight onto the jar rim, as you see me doing here. And I added some hot glue as well. I'm twisting some of the pieces together and wrapping it around. Now, if you can't get yourself some faux pussy willows, you could try this with some real pussy willows as well. You might just have to use some floral wire and bend your stems to create a wreath look. Now, I have seen faux pussy willows at Michael's before, so definitely check out your local craft store. So here is that beautiful little wreath around the rim. Now I wanted to create a not a floral arrangement. This is actually going to be a leaf arrangement for my jar. I have a selection of the pussy willows, some twigs, and some different greenery. I have some from Dollar Tree, from Dollarama, from Michael's. I've had all of these in my stash for a while. I'm just going to remove any tags off of them and trim them down as they were too long for my jar. Of course, depending on the height of your jar will determine how tall you need your stems, or how many you will need if you have created a really large jar. So here I'm just trimming these pussy willows. The wire stems were really thick. So what I like to do is just start it off with the wire cutters, bend it back and forth, and that'll snap the wire. If the paper comes loose, you can use some florist tape to wrap it all up, and that'll just prevent you from getting cut by any of the wires. So now I'm going to make my bouquet. I'm just layering all the different stems together, mixing them all up. Of course, you could use florals instead, but I really love just simple greenery for springtime. I think it's a beautiful, fresh look. You don't see this very often either. Most people use florals. So I thought, you know what, let's do something different here and just create a greenery arrangement, or bouquet for springtime. So I'm just gonna mix them again all together. The twigs really make this stand out and make that really, really natural looking. So once you have them all together, I'm using an elastic band, wrapping it around the stems, and that will hold it all together. It looks beautiful. I'm so happy with how it turned out. My stems are still a little too long, so I'm gonna go ahead and snip off those ends. And then seriously, this project is just another quick and easy and simple project to do as far as making a bouquet this way. You can do this with some fresh as well. You can just put that into place and that is it. It's beautiful. I'm so happy with how this turned out. This next beautiful artwork was going to cost $168, and I knew I could create my own for way less. I'm in Cricut Design Space and I'm using the print and cut operation. I'm selecting birds, yellow birds specifically. I searched up all the options available for the print and cut function, and there's lots to choose from here. This is the one I selected. I'm going to do all the adjustments needed within the computer and I'm going to save my work, and then I'm going to switch over to my device. So I've opened up my project in the Cricut app. I'm going to make it. Again, follow all the prompts. I am using printable iron-on for darks. This is really important. You want to select dark, and it's different from the light surface. I'm going to go and print out my image on my printer. You want to make sure you select Add Bleed. That will end the Use Printer dialog. If you select Add Bleed, it will remove any white outline. My printer needs to have it fed through upside down, so the tag was facing up. It printed out beautifully. I'm placing this on light grip mat. I'm using my brayer to smooth it all out, and now I'm going to send it to my cutting machine. Again, I'm going to be using the Cricut Joy Extra, following all the prompts on my device, and it is cutting out amazingly. This product is so cool to use. So now I'm going to set that aside for now. I'm going to prep my surface on my paper here. I'm using mixed media paper. I'm using a selection of a brush, a card, different color of yellows and greens, and I'm going to create my art background. So I'm just going to spread out all the different colors on my background, and I'm going to start to blend them as well. Now, this is something that's actually really fun to do, so I encourage you to create your own background. If you don't want to do this, you could definitely use some scrapbook paper. That would be a great option for this. So I'm just going to continue to work on my surface until I get a look that I'm really, really happy with. And just to let you know, I am using acrylic art paints here. You could try to use some craft paints, but you might want to add a glazing medium to it. I actually am going to add a glazing medium to mine because I wasn't getting the blending that I really, really wanted. So that is definitely an option, is to blend your acrylic paints with some glaze. You can also see here I am using a rag to help me to blend my colors a lot more smoothly. I'm continuing to look at the original art piece as my inspiration on how to create my background. So I had allowed my paper to dry, and now I am going to attach my paper, my painted mixed media paper, to some heavy duty cardstock or chipboard. I'm using some tacky glue. I'm going to spread it all out evenly right up to the edge, and then I'm going to place my painted mixed media paper onto the chipboard, smooth it out, put something heavy on top, and allow that to dry. So now that it's all dry, I am going to measure out the size that I need to cut my paper down to size so it will fit within my frame. So I'm going to just go ahead and use a paper trimmer here, and this is pretty thick, so I did cut through it a few times, and then I did have to bend it. I flipped it over and I cut through on the other side, and it gave me a really nice straight cut. If you don't have a paper cutter, you can use a steel ruler and a craft cutting knife to get the same look. So I've got my paper all cut down to size. I'm going to make sure it fits within my frame and trim as needed. And now for the bird. So I'm going to just slowly use my weeding tool underneath and it'll slowly lift off. You can see that there is no white line due to that bleeding option that I used when I printed my image out. It completely removes any white line that may be showing. It worked really well. I'm in my heat guide settings and I'm going to be using my mini press to adhere the iron-on onto my paper. So follow all the settings for your machine that you're going to be using for this project or any other projects. I'm prepping my surface here. I've got my heat press going. I'm just going to line everything up and then I'm going to go ahead and press it. So I want my bird to be kind of in the center. And then once my heat press is ready, I'll put my Teflon paper down or parchment paper and then press it into place. You can do the same technique on canvas, on an art canvas. I have done that as well and tested it out and it works really, really well if you're not using mixed media paper. So again, I wanted to create a cohesive look. So I'm going to give the entire piece a coat of some decoupaged glue. It's a great sealant and creates a nice even layer and makes the whole piece look consistent. Put all your pieces into place and then it's ready to be put on display. Absolutely gorgeous. I am so in love with this piece. I am so happy with how it turned out. And again, for a fraction of the cost. So this next project is a challenging one, but it turned out amazing. I've got a brass frame from the thrift store for $1 and this bead wreath from Dollar Tree for $1.50 here in Canada. This is my inspiration piece. It came with the frame only, but we're also going to try to recreate the art piece that's within it as well. You can see it was $78. It is such a cool piece. I'm straightening out the bead wreath. I needed to have a section for the bottom and the top. I'm going to be snipping it down to size using my wire cutters. And then you want to make sure you have some hot glue. We need to seal off both ends where the wire and the bead meets. And you're going to put some hot glue in there and that will prevent the beads from popping off of the wire. So I'm going to, again, do that for each side of my frame to create a bead frame. Now, the original piece, the frame was actually made of iron from what I discovered, but I'm using a brass frame and it worked just fine. So I've got all my pieces together. I'm going to take my frame apart. I decided not to reuse that glass because it turned out that glass piece was actually cracked. I'm going to lay out my bead frame around my brass frame and I'm going to use some hot glue just to initially attach the two together. This isn't going to create a permanent bond. You will need a glue like E6000 as well. So I'm just going to, again, just put the beads into place. And now I'm applying some E6000 to a bead. And I'm going to turn the bead so that the glue and the frame are attached to each other, or touching each other. I decided to use some string and I'm going to wrap the string around the frame. That way here, I know that the E6000 is going to stay connected to my frame while it dries because those beads were moving around. I'm going to go ahead and just add a little bit more hot glue here and there just to help keep it all secure while the E6000 cures. I'm using some Canson watercolor paper for this next step. I'm using the backing and I'm going to trace around it. The backing is from the frame. That way here I'll get the exact size I need for my watercolor paper. I'm going to trim this down to size. Now, if you don't want to do this way, you can definitely use your Cricut machine to cut your watercolor paper out. I'm going to use the draw only operation in Cricut Design Space. I've already selected the image that I want to use. It's a wildflower again. I'm going in and selecting the marker selection operation at the top, and I'm using watercolor markers for this project. The watercolor markers were new to me, so I was so excited to try them out. You need to adjust the size. Again, I'm doing all my work on the computer. And just to let you know, I am also using their subscription service. I'll have that link down below for you as well. So I'm going to use the blue watercolor marker. This is for the Cricut Joy. It comes with a watercolor paintbrush as well. And then I'm going to continue to follow all the prompts on my device. And so this is really cool. You want to make sure you want to switch out the blade with the pen. You also want to make sure you select either a heavy cardstock, or you could also use the watercolor card that they have in the material setting as well. I also made sure that my image lined up with the cards or watercolor paper that's on the mat to make sure it drew out in the proper spot. Ready to go, and I'm going to now make it. And these pens drew on the paper so beautifully, and it turned out so cool. It was so fun to watch because there were so many intricate details on this as well. So I'm going to remove the paper now. And here's the trick. I actually went in and added some hand-drawn lines over top of what we already have. I did not want this to look like a machine had done it. And at this point, it really looked like it had. So to remove that kind of look, you can go over just some of the lines. It doesn't have to be all of them. Just add some hand-drawn lines just here and there, and it would create a lot more of a handmade look like the original piece that we had seen. I'm now going to go in and activate the color. I'm going to just squeeze the tube, and that gets the brush activated. I have some paper towel here to remove any excess water on my paper as well as on my brush. And I'm just going to gently go over my lines. Again, I'm following kind of how my inspiration piece looked. They did not have it entirely colored in. There was quite a bit of the white showing. So I'm just going to continue on here until I'm satisfied with the look that I've got. Every once in a while, you're going to want to turn your paper because you don't want your hand to be resting on the ink, because that will just cause smudging. So you're going to set this aside and allow it to dry well. My frame has all set up. I allowed for 24 hours for the glue to cure. I'm just going to remove my string now. And if you need to, you can go ahead and add some hot glue to just re-secure your frame. You can seal it up with some clear matte. If you're concerned about that watercolor becoming activated again, put the pieces back together, and that's it. I'm telling you, this was a challenging piece, but I'm so happy with how it looks. It is one very, very cool piece of artwork. And again, cost me a fraction of the cost. I gathered up some different supplies here in my home to create some really unique and different bird's nests. I have this sheet music here. When you're using sheet music, you want to make sure that there's lots of music notes and it's a nice, sturdy paper. I also gathered up some scrap of yarn that I had. I'm sure a lot of us crafters have scraps of yarn around and some thread or trim. I thought this bag was perfect. I also decided to go outside, and this little guy wanted to come with me. I wanted to gather up some natural elements as well. He's so excited. Eat a burrito.
Rex. Cat.
Cute cat. So I brought everything upstairs my kitchen here, and I'm going to work on this nice large island counter. I have these beautiful branches. I think this is called Bridal Veil Spirea. I'm not 100% sure on that though. Anyways, it was really nice, and I thought it would be perfect to create some mini wreaths. So I'm going to create several different sizes. I just trimmed off any of the thick stem and removed that, and then just coiled all the smaller stems together to create like a mini wreath. I used wire to wrap it around and help to secure the whole bundle together. Now I created a few different sizes. So depending on how big you want your bird nest to be, you can create several different sizes of these wreaths, and we're going to be stacking them on top of each other to create a bird nest. So I think I ended up doing a total of 4 of the bird's nests, wreaths. Yes, there's 4 right here. And to attach them, you could use some wire if you'd like, but I decided to use some hot glue. Before I did that though, I needed to just make sure that my little mini wreaths weren't gonna come apart on me. So I just secured them a little bit more with some wire as needed. Some of them were coming apart and I needed to make sure that they would hold together. Once I was happy with that, I decided to go in and add some hot glue. And then what you do is just put it on top of your other wreath, press it down and allow the glue to set. You may need to flip it over and add a bit more hot glue just to help bind it all together. I decided to add just a few more extra stems and I wove those in and then added hot glue as needed. To fill in the center of the nest, I'm using hot glue and I'm putting some Spanish moss in the middle and then using Spanish moss to hide any of the hot glue showing as well as any of the wires. I did use a tool to help just shove some of that moss in to create more of a natural look. So I'm going to set this aside and then I'm going to show you a few other ideas and then we're going to put everything together. Now I've got the grass that I had collected. This is really fun stuff. And I'm just bending it to help make it a bit more pliable. You could try soaking it in water, but my grass was nice and pliable, so I didn't need to do that. I'm just staggering or flipping 2 groups together. And because the stems are thicker on one end than the other, and I wanted a nice balanced look, you're just going to create a bit of a nest shape. And I should have done this next step first before I moved on to this, but you'll need some needle and thread. So I just set my nest aside. You can see it's actually holding together just fine. Once you've got your needle and thread all ready to go, you're going to start to stitch it through the middle, wrap it around the cluster of grass, and then you're going to tie a knot to secure it all together. Next, you're going to take your needle and you're going to weave it in and out of your nest to help hold your nest shape together. Now there's going to be one more step that we do to again help hold it all together, but this is step 1 and it really does work. So I'm going to just tie that off with a knot and then I'll need to just kind of squish it and shape it a bit to create the nest that you like. If you feel like you need a bit more in the center like I do, I created another little cluster and I didn't bother to use needle and thread on this. What I ended up doing was using some hot glue and I generously applied some to the center of the main bird's nest. And then I just pushed all that excess grass into place. And then I'm going to again, just kind of shape it a bit. I was really amazed at how well this grass was holding together. So I'm going to trim off any of the excess little bits. I didn't want those to be all over the place, but keeping a natural look. I placed my nest into a box and I sprayed it with some matte Mod Podge sealer. This will help to hold it all together. I have seen some people use some hairspray, but I had this on hand, so that's what I decided to use. I'm allowing that to dry. I'm back inside now and I'm going to now create a nest using all those yarn scraps. I also have some thread scrap here and other sorted scraps such as this fabric, and this thread scrap is just from the edges of frayed fabric. I also have this jute twine scrap. And I decided I also wanted to actually use the fabric scrap. So I'm going to try and just tear it up, but I ended up cutting it into thin strips. And I tried to fray it a bit by pulling on the threads a little. And I also crumpled it in my hand and that created a cool look. I'm using some fabric stiffener for this particular bird's nest. I wanted to try it out. I had this in my stash for a very, very long time. And well, it was clumpy, but I revived it by using some water. If you don't have fabric stiffener, then of course you could use something else like another glue, but I really wanted to try this out and see how it would be. You could maybe use some fabric starch. I think that would be a really cool thing to try as well. So I ended up diluting that thick consistency of the fabric stiffener with some water. Set that aside for now, and I'm going to build my nest shape at this point. So you're just going to gather up all your scraps and just layer it all together until you get a look that you're happy with. Next, I am going to then take my scraps and place it into my liquid. I'm going to press it down so it soaks it all up, flip it over and soak up the other side. I could have used a little bit more liquid, but I made do with what I had here. So I'm squeezing out the excess, and then just any spots that don't have any liquid, I went and put it back in and soaked it. So I'm just going to reshape it now. I'm going to put this over a bowl that's got some saran wrap on it, and then I'm going to put it on a vent that I have here in my home, and the air is going to allow it to help dry. I let it dry overnight. So for another option for bird's nest, you could use this paper shred that you can get for gift baskets, but I'm going to be using the sheet music that I got from my craft room. So I'm just going to tear some sheets out. You can see that there's lots of music notes. That is key because then you can really see the music notes in your projects. So once you got the desired number of sheets that you want, you can put it through your paper shredder. I've got a few different lengths here. I've got a bowl with some plastic wrap and some decoupage glue. So I'm going to mix 4 parts decoupage glue with 1 part water. That will help to create a bit more of a liquidy consistency. It just makes it easier to handle. So I'm going to mix that together, and then I'm going to try a few different ways to apply this to the bowl. So I started off applying some of the glue onto the bowl, and then I added some of the paper strips into the glue. You just want to make sure you don't have too much glue. So I put it in, and then I just removed any of the excess glue and I put it on top of the bowl. Next I thought, you know what, I'm going to see if I can make the process a little bit faster here. And I put some of the dry strips right on top of the bowl and then went over it with some glue. Yeah, this didn't work that great either. So I found that putting it the paper directly into the glue and removing the excess worked the best. Once I had a good base, I'm now taking some of the strips and I'm crinkling it in my hand, placing it into the glue, removing the excess and piling it on top of the base that we had made. This looked really good. It worked so well to create a bit more of a natural bird's nest look. And I have to say, it's been a lot of fun too. Just a warning, this is a very, very messy project, as you can see. So these are both dry. I let them dry overnight. This one popped off so easy, but I did struggle with the paper. I'm not sure why, but I ended up having to take the plastic right off because it was not giving. So I used the plastic and I gently pulled it back until the plastic gave way off of the bowl. So another thought I had was to actually use paper mache, the flour mixture that you can make. I thought that would be actually a really good medium to use for a bird's nest as well. All right, so I finally got that loose. I removed the plastic. You can see it's still quite shiny inside. So you could apply another coat of some decoupage glue and let that dry, and that should take the shine away. I have these decoupage eggs and I shoved those in there, and these cute little eggs that I made. I'm going to show you how they all look with eggs in it, but I'm going to give you some other ideas on how you can use these bird's nests in a playlist coming up. I'm going to show you that shortly. So here are all the different bird's nests that we made today. You can use these for so many different things. I love using bird's nests in my home decor. Let me know which one is your favorite. I also would love to know the types of bird's nests that you make. I love to get so many different ideas from all of you. It really helps me to create content that you would all absolutely love to see. This is a really fun piece, and it's got some staining on it though. Again, I picked it up from the thrift store a while ago. I washed it to try and get some of those stains out. Most of them came out, but there was a few still left. I'm going to use it to cover up this this vase that I had. And the vase, I had used it for a previous project and it didn't work out. So I'm like, well, what else can I do? I'm like, ooh, let's cover it up with one of these doilies. So I'm using some crochet thread and I'm going to wrap the vase with the doily, and then I'm going to tie a knot on one end of the thread, attaching the two ends together, such as you see me doing here. Now, at first I was weaving the thread back and forth, but I didn't like how it was laying on the vase. So I ended up going back in, overlapping the two edges and doing a running stitch. You can see it right here. And then you'll just want to tie a simple knot on the top. That'll help hold it all into place. I did stitch it onto the vase. You could do this off of the vase, but I wanted to make sure I was going to have a nice fit around my vase. So now you can just fold the top in if you need to. Mine was a little bit too long, but that is just depending on the size of your doily and your vase. So I'm going to show you a few ways how you can style this. I've got a battery operated candle there, and I was okay with it, but you couldn't really see the light that well. So I'm trying out some fairy lights, and that looks so much better. You can see how the candle was just kind of dull and how much prettier it is with the fairy lights. You can really see the pattern. Another option is to fill it, of course, with some florals. I'm using some faux evergreens. I've got a half a circle of some styrofoam glued to the bottom, and I'm going to be pressing my stems of evergreens down into that. I didn't use green floral foam because I could actually see it through the white doily, and I didn't like that look. So now I'm just going to add some more greens here. I like to add some height. Some branches would be really pretty as well. I do that quite often. It gives a really nice natural look. But I decided just to keep this simple, just to quickly show you how you can dress it up with some faux greenery and create a really beautiful gardeny spring look. For this next project, you're going to need an embroidery hoop and some sheer fabric. You can see, I can kind of see my hand through it. This fabric is from an old shirt. I'm going to just cut it down because it is fully intact on both ends. I needed to just rip it down so I can fit it over my hoop. So I did just take my hoop apart, and I'm going to be using the inside hoop, of course. I'm going to drape my fabric over top and then press my other hoop over top, and then you'll want to secure it into place by tightening up that top hoop. So now I'm just going to be pulling the fabric so it's taut and you don't see those wrinkles anymore. I am using a hoop that is a good size for the doily that I'm going to be using, but I'm going to show you that here in a moment. First, I needed to trim down the fabric. I made sure that I left enough room because I needed to glue this in place. Now, again, if you don't want to glue anything into place, you could, of course, use some needle and thread and just tack it down. If you have too much fabric, just trim that off. I did have a little bit too much still. I could see it through the other side. So I did need to trim that down. So I'm going to just continue to glue the fabric down into place on the inside rim until it is all set in place. Here is the beautiful thrifted doily that I picked up. It was for $3 and I loved the colors. I actually thought it would be beautiful for springtime. I laid that out until I was happy with the placement. And again, I'm going to be using some hot glue to tack this into place. And if you don't want to do that, I would definitely again use needle and thread. I'm just adding hot glue in the spots where I thought it needed to be held in place so it would lay nice and flat. I did end up having to go back in around and add just a little touch to the edges of the doily as well. I think this turned out so beautiful. I am so happy with it. It's going to be great as some spring decor for our home. I had these old calendars that I had in my stash, and I love the images and the verses that are in here. This particular one is water damaged, but I just wanted to show you how beautiful it is. And they are from Dollar Tree. I selected this one here that's got a beautiful bird's nest with a lovely Bible verse in it. I'm just going to tear it out of the calendar. You could use some scrapbook paper, magazine images for this one. I'm going to be placing this onto some mixed media paper, which is kind of like a strong, sturdy cardstock. It takes wet glue really well, so that's why I decided to go with this. You could put it on cardboard if you like. You could tape this on as well. I'm just trimming off the one edge of my image so it'll fit onto my paper nicely. And I wanted the bird's nest to stay somewhat center. It does go off a little bit, but that is okay. Before I trim off the rest though, I decided I'm going to use some tacky glue to glue my image down. Now I ended up running into a minor issue with this. I will be showing you in a bit, but I'm going to just continue with the process though. So I'm just using a plastic card to smooth out the glue all the way to the edge, and then I'll place my image down onto the glue. I'm going to smooth it out the best I can, and I decided to use a brayer to really get the air bubbles out, and I ended up creasing my image just a little bit. It wasn't too bad. I ended up taking a rag and that really smoothed out that crease. So once you've got that all smoothed out, this is where I discovered that I could see a little bit of the image on the back side of my picture here, and it was coming through where all the light color was showing, but once I hung it up, I didn't notice it anymore. So once the glue was dry, I trimmed off the other edge of my image, and I trimmed off any of the excess mixed media paper as well. So you can see here I'm using a clipboard for my picture hanger, and it's such a fun and easy way to display images. I didn't like the color of it, so I decided to use some white vintage wash from DecoArt and just lightened up that background color. Of course, you can paint it. You could cover it with some pretty scrapbook paper or contact paper, anything like that too, if you like. I like the simplicity of the way it is like this. You can see that my image is curled up a bit, and the reason is because I didn't put something nice and heavy and flat on top while it was drying, but I just curved it a bit and it flattened it out nicely. You can tape it into place as well. Just for another added decorative touch, I am adding this piece of farmhouse ribbon I picked up from Dollar Tree. I'm just tying a simple bow. And I'm telling you, this is such an easy way to create some art for your decor for any season. And I think this one is perfect for Easter. So this next one is a cool one. I picked up this frame over Christmas time and I didn't get around to using it at Christmas. So I'm like, I love this. I think that would be great for Easter. It's kind of got the barn doors, but I thought the wood actually looked a bit like stone. So I thought it would be really cool to turn this into a resurrection display. So I'm just gonna, of course, remove the backing, and there is some glass. So I'm gonna be removing that as well. You can see those barn doors. It looks so cool. So I went ahead and cleaned my glass. I'm setting everything aside for now. And you can see how those slide. I have this scrapbook paper. It is kind of like a stone, but I needed it to be darker. So if you already have some nice dark stone scrapbook paper, you won't need to do this step. But if you only have some light stuff, then this is a tip for you. You can take some stain and you can just stain your paper, and you can see the image from underneath is still showing through. I didn't quite like the way this color quite looked, so I ended up adding some distress ink in a bit here, but first I just dabbed on just to create a bit more texture. So I'm going to try frayed burlap and vintage photo on here to see which one I like best. I'm trying the vintage photo first, and it was still not quite the right color. I did add a little bit of it here and there, and then I went ahead and added the frayed burlap color, and I like that so much better. And it gave it a really, really unique look. So once I added the color I wanted, I just took a rag, wiped off the excess, and you can see the texture there is. I'm tracing around the backing so I have the correct size to fit within the frame. I'm going to use my paper trimmer to trim it down, but you could use a steel ruler and a craft blade if you would like. Next, I am going into Cricut Design Space and I designed this image here. It says he is resin. You can go to Cricut Design Space. I will have that link down below for you if you would like to use this image as well. So you just need to adjust the size accordingly to whatever project you are creating. And then I am going to just go ahead and make it and follow all the prompts as they pop up on my screen. I am using smart vinyl, so I don't need a mat for this. Now you can see here, I am using black to start, but I ended up changing my mind and I decided to go with white. So my image has all been cut out. I'm just gonna go ahead and weed out all the excess vinyl. So you're gonna see the black vinyl pop up once in a while, but it's going to be the same steps that I use for the white. I had already placed my transfer paper onto the vinyl and I'm just trimming it up so it fits onto the glass really nicely. I have these branches as well. I'm just going to trim some pieces down to size that are going to fit on the glass. Now, I just have the glass right now. I'm just going to quickly just cut my pieces down to size so I have an idea of how big I need them. I decided to get my frame so I can make sure that everything is going to fit inside here nicely. So I'm just going to trim things up as needed. I didn't place my vinyl onto the glass just yet because right now I'm just focusing on creating a little rugged cross. So I trimmed up my branches as needed, and then I am just going to go ahead and put those into place again. And I decided I wanted to use some cheesecloth as the linen cloth that was removed off of Jesus when he rose again. So I'm just cutting this piece down, and I decided I wanted to just drape that over the cross at the back side. So I'm gonna lift that up now, and then I'm gonna glue that little piece of cloth into place on the back side of my cross. And then I'm gonna put my other little pieces, the crossbars. You can see I have one piece for one side and another piece for the opposite side. That way here, it'll sit as flat as I can get it onto the glass and still have some texture. So I'm just kind of creating like a bit of a dimensional look here. I'm going to just, again, glue my cloth into place on the cross, and then I'm going to go ahead and glue the entire piece onto the onto the glass. And yes, I am just going to go ahead and use some hot glue. Of course, use your favorite adhesive. So I took the frame away now. I can add my vinyl. It's easier to add the vinyl with the frame not in place. So I'm going to just line that up, and then I'm going to burnish that into place. And then I'll go ahead and remove the transfer tape. I did notice that it did stick really well to the glass. So I just used my little weeding tool just to help me lift that up, burnished anywhere where it might have been lifting a little bit, and then went ahead and finished pulling that up. And doesn't that look cute so far? I love it. It's so beautiful. So now I'm going to just put my frame all back together. I'm going to start off with my glass, and then I'm going to add my scrapbook paper, the backing, and this is a phenomenal statement piece for Easter, and it's a great creative way to use a picture frame like this if you can find one in your thrift store. Let me know what you think. This next one is a really simple project, but it is another statement piece. I'm using some pieces of driftwood to create a rugged cross. I've done this before and I've really liked the way it looks, but my old cross broke, so I wanted to create myself a new one. You could just use regular branches for this. I needed to trim down my crossbar here, so I'm just trying to use my my pruners to trim it down. It was pretty tough wood. Just rounding off the edge just to help balance out both ends. Now I'm creating a notch in the crossbar. I just used my pruning shears and then a knife to just carve out a notch. And this was working okay, but I decided to get a little bit of a saw in there to really work away at that wood to create a decent notch. So I had a good fit. So I was finally able to get a decent notch in that wood. I'm going to attach it to the main piece of wood here. I'm going to use some hot glue, and then I'm going to just press and hold that in place until the glue sets. I used quite a bit, so you definitely want to hold that. Now I'm going to use some twine, and I'm going to just wrap it around the wood. I'm just going to tie a simple knot and then wrap it around several times. This can be used in a planter. You could add a little hook and hang it on your wall, or you could just have it propped up against the wall or anything you'd like. I like the simplicity of this. It is such a statement piece, and I can't wait to put it up for Easter. I wanted to create some candle holders. So I had these little pots, wooden pots that I picked up from the thrift store and my local dollar store. I also have these wood slices. I decided to stain the little cups with some gel stain. I have a combination of walnut stain and oak. And I'm going to stain the little pots just so that they don't stand out too much on my display that I'm going to be creating. So I'm going to just allow the stain to dry, and then I'm going to glue those pieces together to the wood slices. I'm creating a total of 8 of my little candle holders, and you could of course just buy some if you want, but I had the supplies to make my own, and I think they turned out so cute. So now I'm going to create a table centerpiece just down the middle of my table. I've already got the tablecloth in place and a table runner. I picked up this leaf garland from Dollar Tree last year. I think it's beautiful. I'm going to go ahead and tuck some branches that I had foraged in amongst the vine. And you could add anything you'd like. Pussy willows would be really pretty as well. So I'm just creating like a centerpiece down the middle of my table. I wanted to create kind of like an Advent for the Holy Week coming up. So Holy Week runs for a total of 7 days, and then you've got Easter Sunday, and I thought I'm going to add one extra candle for Easter Sunday. So here I'm tucking some flowers in amongst the branches and the vine. These are some some faux flowers from Dollar Tree. They're so pretty. I decided to add some little fairy lights as well. This is a strand of 30 lights. I'm just going to weave those in and out of the branches and the florals that I have here. I hid the battery pack, and I'm going to be hiding it even more once I add some moss to this. So this is just a pretty whimsical touch. This is a great way to create a table centerpiece if you don't want anything to be permanent. So I've got 7 cream candles and 1 white candle. I'm going to just go ahead and put those into my little candle cups, and then I'm going to start to place the candles in amongst all my lovely greenery and florals and branches. I placed the white one in the middle, and then I'm just going to disperse all the other ones in amongst everything. There's no right or wrong to doing this part. So I'm going to go ahead and add moss now. Moss, I forage it, but I also purchased the preserved reindeer moss. So I'm using a combination of both. Some bird's nests would be really cute in here, or some little figurines would be so adorable in amongst all of this. I'm keeping mine simple. I wanted it to look like a meadow with beautiful wildflowers growing up in the mountains. I just love that look, and I think this is looking just like that. So as you can see here, I am making sure I'm covering up my battery pack at this point, and then I'm just going to go ahead and add some little bits here and there just to complete the look until I'm happy with how it looks. I'm adding some more florals just because I wanted a bit more color. So I've got these pretty little pink stems, and then I'm also going to take apart these small little arrangements that I had. I had made them last year, and I thought, you know what, I'm going to reuse these for this project here. So I just took it apart again, and I'm going to just place those in amongst the other greenery and stems and what have you until you get this beautiful look. So just a little tip here to clean up your mess. I am going to be using this lint roller, and that cleans up all that moss that I had on the table. So here is my display. I think it turned out absolutely gorgeous. I am so happy with it. I'm going to be using some mixed media paper for this first project. You want a cardstock that's nice and sturdy and that can take some liquid really well. I'm going to choose a selection of some of my scrap papers. A lot of these scraps were old experiments or just like bits from projects that I have worked on over the years. I mean, this is an old pile of scrap paper. I've got all my scraps all picked out. Now I'm just going to tear them down into some more usable sizes. I've got some old napkin and some magazine sheets, some scrapbook paper, some old ledger paper, cardstock, you name it, I've got in this pile. So I'm just going to work through this. Again, just tearing them down into smaller sizes and deciding on my color combination that I also want to use for this particular project. Once you have your selection of papers all picked out, you're going to need some decoupaged glue. So I'm just using the Craftsmart brand here. You can use any brand that you like. You're going to apply some of the glue to your mixed media paper or whichever cardstock you're using. Put your paper into place and put another layer of your decoupage glue over top. You're also going to want to start to choose some of your papers that you're using and overlap them over your other pieces. And you're going to need to make sure you've got enough glue underneath and on top. You don't want it too heavily saturated, but if you don't have enough glue, then it's going to bubble quite a bit. I don't mind a bit of bubbling, but I don't want it to be so bad that my paper is going to end up coming off later on. So I'm going to just continue to add my papers and layer them, adding my glue. I'm not going right up to the edge of my paper. I'm going to use the white around it kind of as a frame. I'm also going to start to layer some of my napkin and tissue over some of this. We're just creating a really fun collage, just kind of messy and artful. I love to do this. This is such a fun way to use up scraps. You could do a larger version. That's called a masterboard, and that could be used for all kinds of really fun projects, especially if you have a lot of scrap paper such as I do. Look how beautiful this is. I really like the pop of color, but I'm going to show you what I'll be doing with that in a bit. First of all, I am going to use my Cricut machine to cut out this leaf pattern. Originally, I was going to go with a light gray color, but I decided to change that up. I'll show you what color I end up using instead, but I'm going to show you both examples to show you what it looks like on my collaged paper. So here's the green that I ended up going with. I'm just going to peel it off the mat. I am using the new Cricut Joy Extra machine. I am loving this machine so much. All right, so here you can see the gray. I'm not totally crazy about how it's popping off the page. I feel like it's just not enough. I love the green. I think that's gorgeous, but I felt like I need to tone my background down. So I'm going to use some Deco Art Vintage Effects whitewash. I'm just going to use a rag and just apply that onto the papers. And you can kind of see here how it tones down that color. It just helps to just kind of bring it all together so it doesn't look so mishmashed. And that will also help my leaf pattern here to pop so much better. I'm so much happier with that. I've got an altered clipboard that I have done in a previous video. I'll have that link down in the description box if you want to see how I did that. But you can see that my mixed media paper here did not fit. So I'm going to trim it down to size so it will fit on my clipboard. I'm also going to make sure I keep a nice border around the edge. You can see how much easier that fits, and this is a great way to display some art because you can continually change it out. So I'm just going to decide here on which way I want my leaf pattern to go, and then I'm going to use some tacky glue, and I'm adding some little dabs here and there on my leaf pattern. I'm going to spread it out. You can use your finger, a paintbrush, whatever you have. You want to work quickly because this glue will set up fast. I really like to use tacky glue for projects like this. I find that it is a really effective glue. So I'm going to put my leaf pattern into place, and then I'm going to put some weight on the top of it, allow it to set up, and then it's ready to be put on display. I think it turned out gorgeous. Such a fun way to use up our scraps. I wanted to try and use some of my thicker scraps here, so I'm just going to go through them all. You can see I've got some old cards, projects that I had done over Christmas time. I even have these pieces of some watercolor paper. I was trying to make some watercolor cards, but I folded them wrong, so I'm like, I'm just going to throw those in my scrap bin. I'm like, but let's use them. Let's try to use these scraps. So I'm going to use these strips of watercolor paper that I had. I'm going to cut them down to size. Cut yours down to any size that works for you. These are some nice long strips. So I believe they were about 2 inches wide, and they were several inches long. I'm sorry, I don't have the measurements. I think they were probably 8.5, but I'm not totally sure. I'm using my scoreboard here, and I'm going to measure every 2 inches. And sorry, I think actually it was 3 inches wide, my paper. I'm sorry, I cannot remember. But every 2 inches I scored my paper. And then you can see the score lines here. But if you do not have a scoreboard, you can measure out every 2 inches using a steel ruler. And then using a bone folder, you want to score along the pencil line that you've created, that you've measured, and then you will have some score marks. All right, so I'm going to start to fold. I'm going to create an accordion style fold here. And then I'm going to fold my other piece as well. We are actually going to be attaching these 2 strips together. We are going to be creating an accordion mini album. They are another really fun way to use up our tiny little scraps that we have in our stash. So I'm just going to try and figure out here how I'm putting them together so I've got a continuous strip of accordion. And I had to trim off the one end. I did not need that little piece. And then I'm going to glue our strips here together. I'm just going to use a glue stick, but you can use any glue that you like. You just want to make sure that it is a good bond between the strips. So I'm going to attach those, and then you want to let that glue set up a bit before we move on. So now I'm going to go through my stash of assorted decorative papers. These pieces here are, believe it or not, from a Kleenex box, and I thought they would be perfect for something like this. I'm just going to decide on what I want to use, and they were the right size to fit on the ends of my little accordion mini book. So I'm just going to trim them down to size. I will need to trim them down here more once I've got them attached, but for now they are a more usable size. I am going to just continue to use my glue stick to attach everything to my accordion. Before I add my covers though, I wanted to create a closure. So I'm just using some strips of trim, and I'm just going to add that to the middle of each end, and use any trim that you like. I'm using one that's a thinner weight because I didn't want it to pop through the image too much, pop through the paper too much. So I wanted to use just a thin strip here. I'm adding it to the middle, and I'm going to again just use my tacky glue to put it into place. Allow that to set, and then I'm going to go ahead and do the other end this exact same way as well. I did need to add a knot on each end of my trim because it was fraying a little bit. So just keep that in mind if you do run into that as well. So now I'm going to add my pieces of Kleenex box here onto my covers, onto the ends of my accordion book. Again, I'm just using some tacky glue. for this. Some of the papers you will need to use a heavier weight glue, such as a tacky glue, other than your glue stick. And then that way here, you know that the pieces will stay in place. I'm going to go ahead and use a bone folder here just to make sure I've got a really good contact between my two papers. And then I'm going to work on the other end as well. At this point, you could trim it up if you'd like. I sometimes like to just let the glue set before I start trimming it. Once you've got those pieces in place, I'm using some binder clips to help hold it all together while the glue sets. And you could just put some weight on top of this as well, and that will help to set it up as well. The glue has now set. I'm just removing those binder clips. And now you can start to work on the inside. At this point, you could trim up the ends if you'd like, but that's just whenever you feel like doing it. There's no right or wrong to trimming up any of the ends. This is where you can use those really odd little pieces of paper that you may have in your stash. I've got this little tiny piece of scrapbook paper. Again, I'm just going to use my glue stick to adhere these. So I'm just going to put these into place onto each panel. You can do the front and the back side of this accordion album. I'm just going to show you the basic of applying some of the papers into the small little panels. And then I'm going to show you a project that I had done several years ago that's doing the same technique. It's just a different application. It is such a fun project, but it's same technique where you're just using up your scraps and putting them into place and then having fun. This is where you can get really, really artistic with this project and use up any of those tiny little scraps. You can see I'm folding the paper around the edge of one of the panels. That way here I would get a good measurement before I apply it to the panel. It works really well. So here's the base of our accordion mini album. It's all ready to go, ready to get artistic and have fun with it. You can get this as a gift or just use it for your own little artsy experiments. So we're gonna bust through our scraps again. I am looking for some thinner papers again. I've got quite a few. I'm using an assortment of pages. I've got a bowl that I've covered in some plastic wrap. Now, I should have maybe added like a thin coat of maybe some oil or something to help to release our project once we're done. So keep that in mind, or I have another tip for you. But in the meantime, before we get to that, I'm going to just tear my pages up. I'm also crinkling them. That helps to make them more pliable so they're easy to apply to our bowl. We are going to create a paper mache type look of bowl, except we're doing it decoupage style. So I've got this brown paper. I'm going to set that aside for later on, but you can see the assortment of papers that I have. I'm going to be using some school glue, just some basic white glue. I'm using about 4 parts glue to 1 part water. You just want to make sure that your glue is runnier than typical. Otherwise, it doesn't absorb into the paper and create a nice bond between each other. So I'm going to apply some glue to the bowl, and then I'm going to start to add my papers to the bowl. I'm using my finger to mold the paper around the bowl. That will create that look that we want. I have done this before using fabric. Again, I'm going to have that video linked down below in the description for you. I will have a playlist for you of the videos mentioned in this video. I will have that playlist linked at the end of this video that you're watching right now, so definitely stay tuned till the end. So I'm going to just continue to layer my papers, just like you saw me doing with our mixed media paper. You want to layer your pieces, add your glue, and then just continue to layer it, smooth it out best you can so you've got good adhesion between all of your paper pieces. And I'm going to continue to add the paper and then put it upside down on a bottle or set, allow it to set up before you move on. I didn't need to let it fully dry at this point, but I did want it to set up enough so that I'm not moving my papers around while I add my next layer. So this is layer number 2. I'm going to go ahead and just use the assortment of papers that I'm using here. I'm using, again, thinner papers. It will be more difficult to do this project if you were using thicker papers. They just won't mold to your bowl as well as these thinner papers will. So I'm going to have some more scrap paper busting projects for you during the summer. So again, just definitely stay tuned. There's going to be some really fun projects. I'm so excited to try them and share them with you. I am also curious, how have you busted through your stash of either fabrics or paper? Let me know in the comments. It gives me lots of ideas if you share with me. If maybe there's some things I had never thought of. So I know there are so many of you who are so crafty and talented out there. And I just love it when you folks share with me. It's just so inspirational. So I ended up adding a total of 3, maybe 4 layers at this point before I allowed it to dry. So just continue to layer up all your papers until you're happy with the look. At this point, I am adding my final decorative layer. This is layer number 4. So I'm being more mindful with my paper placement and the types of paper that I am putting down. So I've got some painted book page, I've got some decorative scrapbook pages, some dictionary pages, and some ledger pages, all in some pretty colors that I wanted to show. I allowed that to set up, and this sat for I think 3, 4, maybe 5 days. And you guys, this is where I discovered my struggle. I had a heck of a time getting this off. And I think what ended up happening is that it ended up shrinking and really clinging to the bowl. So if I had maybe just a slight coat of oil or something to help to release it, or if I should have popped it off before it got too dry and then allowed it to finish drying without being on my bowl mold. But I'm using a metal spatula slipping it between the bowl and the paper and plastic to help to release it. And this did work. It just took me some time. And I was being very careful because I didn't want to tear my bowl. Eventually it did release, and I was so glad. I was getting so frustrated at this point. So learn from my mistake. So this looks pretty cool. There's a slight sheen on the inside. You could leave this as is, but I decided I wanted to use this decorative craft paper. It's leftover from some gift wrap actually. And so I tore it up, and then I'm going to add my final layer to the inside. I'm going to be honest, I actually kind of regret adding this layer. I might end up going in and toning it down a bit. I found that it actually was too dark, and I'll show you why here in a minute. So I haven't decided if I'm going to add like a whitewash to the inside or not. I haven't decided that yet, but I'm just going to show you how it came out as is. But you can see how I'm just layering my paper pieces again, and you can see how it came out really dark. Yes, it's wet at this point, but once it dries, it was really, really dark. You can see that right here. You can trim off the edge with some scissors. I decided to tear it because I wanted that rough, artistic look to it. And there's lots of ways you can finish off the edge, but I just left mine raw as is. These bowls are so fun to use as a decorative element, or I like to use it to store some little pieces here in my craft room. I got these wooden mushrooms from Amazon. It came in a box full of some different sizes and shapes. I also have these rub-on transfers that I got from Dollar Tree, as well as another craft store. You also need a selection of some craft paints in the color selection you would like. I'm also using this cream, which is like an off-white color for the base. I'm going to give the mushrooms 2 to 3 coats of the paint. If you want the wood grain to show through, then I would just use 1 coat of the paint. I'm going to coat the underside of the mushroom cap as well. I just really love this green color. It's so pretty and fresh for spring and summer, as well as this pretty daffodil yellow color. Another really fun color is this dogwood pink, and they're all from Deco Art. I have seen a selection of some wood mushrooms at Dollar Tree and other craft stores as well. So do check out all the different craft stores that you have in your location. I'm going to give a coat of the off-white paint on the stems. Again, I'm going to be giving it 2 to 3 coats, and if you want the wood grain to show through, then I would definitely just use 1 coat. I'm being very careful when I take my paintbrush and I go up underneath the mushroom cap so I don't get white on the underside. I think these mushrooms are going to be so cute for like a child's room or in like a little library or a little study nook. I think they're just such a pretty touch. I'm going to now use these rub-on transfers. I got these ones last year from Dollar Tree, and you can get rub-on transfers from other locations as well, at wherever you can pick up some craft supplies. I'm going to just cut out the little pieces that I want to use on my mushrooms, and I just find that cutting them straight out like this works the best. It's easier to handle each image. So I'm going to start off by applying these rub-on transfers onto the stem. Now I'm going to go ahead and show you with this one what I'll do. It's you just want to just take a craft stick and start to rub the image on, and you'll kind of see how it transfers on. If you want it to be more precise, then I would cut into the plastic just to make it so it forms around your mushroom stem a little bit more easily. I'm going to continue to add these little images all the way around the stem until I get a look that I like. Really like how this one turned out. It kind of has a folk art look. So I'm going to show you how you can apply it to the mushroom cap. I'm just going to use my fingernail to transfer this. This was just some leftover bits that I had in my stash that I wanted to try and use up. I have to admit, I am not as crazy about this on the mushroom cap as I like it on the stem. It could have just been maybe the images I was using, but I prefer the mushroom stem a whole lot better than the mushroom cap look. But you experiment, play around. If you don't like it, you could always just paint over it. But like I said, I just wanted to show you what this looks like as well. Another option, if you don't have any rub-on transfers, is if you are really, really good at painting, you can definitely hand paint this. You can use like paint markers or a fine tip paintbrush, or you could even draw on these. I thought that would be a really interesting touch. If you can get your hands on some delicate stickers, that is another option. There's lots of different ways that you can transform these stems. You could just get really creative here. You could decoupage some napkins on here as well. That would be a really easy project too. I'm going to give them all a coat of some matte varnish, and then that's it. They are so pretty. You can use them in the wreath or any way that you'd like in your decor. I love to craft with doilies. I picked this one up from the thrift store. I'm also using a piece of scrap fabric, another thing I love to craft with, and I'm going to trim the scrap fabric down to size so it'll fit underneath my doily. So you can see I'm just folding it half and trimming off the excess, being very careful not to cut into my doily. I'm going to continue to trim down the fabric until I've got the right size that will fit underneath the doily. So you could use some decoupage glue for this, but I decided to use some white school glue. I am going to mix 1 part glue to 1 part water. And I find that school glue creates a really matte finish. I didn't want there to be any sheen to this, so I decided that white glue would be the best. I'm going to use a decoupage bottle, and I'm going to place the tin on top of that. This is going to be my base. I'm soaking my fabric in the glue solution, and I'm going to drape it over the tin. That will create a base for this. It gives a really, really cool shape, And then I'm going to be allowing that to dry. But first I wanted to just drape it, shape it, and then I'm going to go ahead and do the same with the doily. Soak it up really well. You can make some more glue if you need to, but I find that once you squeeze it out, it actually releases quite a bit. It's a really messy project, so you'll want to use a protective surface. I'm going to drape that on top, and I'm going to set it aside and allow it to dry. When you drape it over top, you want to make sure it's all centered. So I'm going to go ahead and just kind of pull on it and just straighten things out until I'm happy with how it looks, because that's exactly how it's going to dry. So I allowed it to dry overnight, and now the doily released very easily, but I discovered here that my fabric was a little bit off kilter, so I just took some scissors and trimmed it off. You don't end up seeing that edge, but you could always just kind of fray it a bit if it bothers you. Just going to gently remove the fabric off of the tin, and at this point, you can put it back together as is. I decided to keep the tin in place because it created a more sturdy surface, and I really liked the shape of it. I was happy with that. I'm using some fabric glue on the tin, and I'm going to just use my finger to spread it around, and that's what I'm going to use to adhere the fabric. I just thought that that would probably work best. If you have another suggestion for glue, feel free to leave that down in the comments section just to let me know, because I wasn't exactly sure which other glue would work for this. So I'm going to go ahead and use a little bit of fabric glue to adhere the doily as well, and just a little bit. I didn't need to add too much, so I'm just again using my finger, spreading that on the fabric. I don't like it to be too heavy because it will show through. So I'm going to put the doily in place. I'm going to put it back on my decoupage glue bottle, and I'm going to allow that to set up. Now, I did end up coming in and adding just a little bit of hot glue here and there underneath the rim just to help hold it into place better. And then you can start to assemble the rest of your mushroom. So I'm going to use this branch that I foraged. I cut it down to size already, and I'm going to again use hot glue. I'm generously applying hot glue to the stem, and then I'm going to put that into place underneath. And this was really fun and easy, a great way to use those doilies a lot of us collect. And I'm going to again use a wood piece to create a nice stable place for me to put this on display, and I love it. I think it's such a unique mushroom. Let me know what you think of this one down below. We're gonna start off with this ceramic bird. Dollar Tree has had these for several years at my local store. Let me know if they are still available at your local store. I'm going to be giving it a coat of some gesso. I'm using the Artist Loft brand. If you're not sure what gesso is, it is a primer. Artists use it to prepare their substrates for paint, and I find that it works so well for crafting. So I'm going to give this bird 2 coats of my white gesso. I'm using the Artist Loft brand because it is a thinner texture, so it's not going to clog up all the different texture on the bird. Once my 2 coats are dry, I'm going to now give my bird 2 coats of some warm antique white paint, and I'm going to allow that to dry as well. Now I am using craft paint because again, it's a thinner consistency, and I don't want that to clog up all the different textures that you see on this bird. I've allowed the 2 coats to dry, and I'm going to seal it up with some matte varnish from the DecoArt brand. Now, you're probably like, Donna, why so many layers? Well, I am creating an antique look, and I wanted to seal up the craft paint because it's very, very porous. And the next step I'm going to be doing will really absorb into that paint and create a totally different look. So it's all nice and dry now. I'm going to go in and use some walnut gel stain, again from DecoArt. It's my favorite gel stain to use. And I'm going to apply the gel stain into all the nooks and crannies on the bird, getting it right into all those feathers with a paintbrush. And then I'm going to take a rag and wipe off the excess. You can see the beautiful texture that's left behind. Now, if I went and added the gel stain right over top of that craft paint. That craft paint would have just absorbed that stain and you would have had kind of an icky brown look. So this is what it looks like all dry now. I have this candlestick that I picked up from the thrift store, and it's got a bit of a lip, so I needed to lift that by using a wood slice in the center. I'm going to glue that, and I use this wood candlestick seasonally, so I can change this out by just popping off that wood slice as needed. I'm going to be working right on the wood slice here by creating a faux nest. I'm adding some hot glue to the edge and pressing some Spanish moss into that glue. Now, like I said, I'm working just on the wood slice, so being careful not to get glue all over my candlestick. So I've got the nest built up, my bird fits in there nicely. I decided to add some twigs to create a more natural look. I just, again, add some glue, and I'm making sure that I'm not touching my candlestick. Even if I do, the hot glue is pretty easy to remove, so I'm not too concerned about it. This is not an antique candlestick. It's a newer piece, but I found it for a great deal at the thrift store. I decided that it needed a little pop of color, so I'm just using this scrap greenery that I had in my stash. I'm trimming it down, and I'm going to glue some little pieces in place as if it's a tree that is leafing out. You could add some feathers or some flowers. That would be a really pretty touch as well. I just like the simplicity of the greenery, so I'm going to add some little bits here and there, and then I'm going to just see how my bird looks sitting in there. I think it looks great. I'm loving this, but I went and I attempted to glue my bird into place, and I discovered that because there's so much depth with the branches and the moss and whatnot, I wasn't getting an attachment between the glue and the original wood slice. So I'm adding another little wood slice to the bottom of my bird, adding more hot glue, and now it is attaching to the other wood slice that I had on the candlestick, and that's it. This was a really easy project to put together, and I think it looks so beautiful. Dollar Tree has had these garden plaques for quite a while. I have decided that I wanted to recreate this, make it look way more high-end than it is. I'm covering it up with some gesso again. I'm using a stiff brush, and I'm getting right into all the lettering and in between the leaves and flowers. I did have to give it 2 coats because you can see that the color is still showing through quite a bit, and I didn't want that to come through on my next layer. So I'm going to give it 2 coats, allow it to dry well. Now I'm going to go over it with some leaf green craft paint. You can see the color still coming through a bit, but once I've got the craft paint on, you're not even going to see that color any longer. So I'm gonna go over it. Again, I wanted to use craft paint because it goes on thinner and it's not gonna clog up all the texture on the garden plaque. And then I am going to be giving it 2 coats of the paint, and I'm allowing it to dry really well in between. I'm going in now and I'm going to add my 2nd coat of the craft paint. You can see it really makes a difference. It was looking quite mottled looking before, and I didn't really want that to look. So here, both layers are dry. I'm going to go over it with some white vintage wash, again from Deco Art. And how you use this is you apply it with a paintbrush. I'm really making sure I'm adding it right into the lettering. And then you're going to take a rag and wipe off the excess. It creates a really cool whitewashed look. And if you get it right into that lettering, it really, really pops. I really like this look. I think it looks so pretty and fresh for spring. So I'm going to go ahead and work in around the butterfly and the flowers, really making sure I get all right into all that texture, and then take my rag and wipe off the excess. You may need to go over it again, which I do need to do, which I'll show you here in a minute. Right here, I'm going over the lettering again, and I'm stippling it right in there, and then I'm being careful not to lift too much of it off, just enough so you can see just the lettering because I really wanted those words to stand out. So I'm going to go ahead and work on that, and then I'll show you what it looks like here in a minute. I'm adding this to a wood plaque that I got from Dollar Tree. I'm going to remove the hanger for now because it is in my way. As you can see, it looks really beautiful as is, but I wanted it to be a little bit lighter. So I'm going to use my whitewash again. I'm applying it this time just with a rag, and then I will allow it to dry well. You do need the wood to be really dry because we need to be able to glue the two pieces together, and the glue is not going to stick if the surface is still moist. I'm also adding some of the whitewash to the edge of the plaque. It's just MDF, but it actually worked really well. It made a more cohesive look. So here's our plaque all ready to go, and so is our wood plaque. And I'm going to now glue the two pieces together. I am using a combination of some E6000 and hot glue. So I'm just figuring out my placement before I add my adhesive. I'm just adding a little bit of E6000, just a couple of globs of that. And then I'm being more generous with my hot glue. I'm going to add that to the center as well. And then I'm going to just quickly line this up. And then I'm going to press down on it because I want to make sure that the E6000 and the plaque and the wood are all stuck together. Now I'm going to add the string back into place. I'm just using the same string that it came with, and then just string that in, tie the knots, and you can decorate this up if you'd like. I like the simplicity of this, but I think it's so pretty and it looks so fresh for my spring decor. Dollar Tree has had these cloche in their supplies for crafting for a while now, and they are so fun to use. I am using this off-white chalk paint to spray paint the base. I didn't want the black. I'm also going to be snipping off that little plastic bit that's on the underside of the base, and I'm just using some wire cutters just to snip that right off. I'm trying to make it as flat as possible because I want to add this battery pack of fairy lights to the underside. So there is a hole in this base, and I'm able to feed the fairy lights through that hole. This strand of fairy lights has 20 lights. Dollar Tree has some that have got 12 lights, so you could use those as well, but I already have these in my stash, so I'm using these ones. I'm going to glue the wire into the base. I am just moving things around until I've got everything fitting in place, and then I will add glue to the rest of the wire to help hold it in place. You just want to make sure that the glue sets up really well before you move on. So the glue is set. I'm adding some glue to the battery pack. You just want to make sure you can get at the batteries to replace them as needed. And I use an end of a paintbrush to turn the switch on and off because it was a little too tight for my fingers. I'm using these beautiful little flowers. They come in different colors from Dollar Tree. They still had them. I saw them in my store, but I had these white ones already in my stash. Now, this is a fun part. You can see I'm folding the light in half, and I'm going to put that light up into the flower stem, and it just helps it just to glow so magically. I am using some needle nose pliers just to help push the light up into the stem a little bit as needed. I am using some hot glue to help hold those lights into place. I'm going about every second flower, and then I'm also going to leave some of the lights at the very end blank. I'm not adding any flowers at all to the end. So these were new to my store, and they were some cute little mushrooms in their fairy garden section. So I am just pulling a few sizes out, and I'm going to decide on which sizes I wanted to use. I'm just going to use 3 mushrooms. I couldn't decide between these 2 smaller ones. You're probably like, Donna, go with the tiny one, or Donna, go with the next size up. I decided to go with this one. I thought it looked best. Of course, go with whichever size you'd like. But you know what? They were a little too bright for me. I wanted to tone it down to give it a bit more of a softer look. I'm using some peach paint, some light spring green, and a daffodil yellow, and I'm going to add it to the mushroom tops. And then I'm taking a rag and I'm just going to dab it off gently. And what I'm going to do is just slowly build up my color, but still allowing a bit of the color from underneath show through. Add some paint, dab it off, set it aside, allow it to dry. And I'm just going to keep going back and forth like that until I get a look that I'm really happy with. The only one that I wasn't too happy with was the yellow. I wish I actually had a softer yellow. I could have made mine, but to tell you the truth, I was being a little bit lazy. So I ended up adding a little bit of peach paint to the yellow as well, just like blending it in until I got a nice soft, gentle look. And it really created an interesting depth to the mushroom tops. So I ended up covering up the little dots. So I'm just going in with the end of a paintbrush and some white paint, and I'm adding those dots back in, and I'll allow that to dry. And I did that to all of my mushrooms. Now I'm gonna seal them up with some matte varnish. That'll prevent the paint from chipping off and also create a bit more depth. I don't know, somehow it just makes these things pop just a little bit more. So I'm gonna give those a coat of the varnish, set them aside, allow them to dry well. So some other accessories is this faux greenery, some twigs, some reindeer moss, and some branches. I also have my lights and then the topper for my cloche here. So I'm gonna start to just build my layers. I've got this nice little twig and I just needed to cut it down to size so it'll fit underneath my cloche. And I added some glue generously to the base, and it is really important. You'll wanna hold this in place until that glue sets. It will take a little while for that glue to set, but once you got it all set up, you can let it go. So now I'm just going to go ahead and just measure to make sure that my cloche fits over top of that branch still. And I'm going to start adding some other little branches here. This is a piece that I got from a bag of some branches from Dollar Tree, believe it or not. They were some little birch bark stems. Birch tree stems. I'm going to start to add my mushrooms. I wanted one sitting on top of that like little mini log that you see there. I'm going to glue that in place, and I'm going to start to add my other mushrooms. You just want to make sure that you don't have too much around the outer ring, because you need your cloche to be able to close back over top, and you need room for the lip of the cloche. I'm going to go ahead and add another little branch here and some more mushrooms, and then I will go in and start to add my moss. With projects like this, it's just all about layering all your different pieces. Adding all these different elements really create a beautiful and whimsical look. I love it. It just gets my imagination going. So I wanted to add a fairy light to the very, very top of the cloche lid. And the reason for that is because I want my lights to be spiraling throughout this cloche. And I found that doing this, it really works best. And now I'm just going to go ahead and add some more branches and some moss and all my other little decorative elements. You can add some greenery, some florals. You can even add like a cute little figurine of a forest animal, or like a little ladybug or something would be really cute in there too. So I'm going to also start to wind my wire, my lights in place that are on the wire here. Now I had somebody comment they didn't like the look of the wire. So if you don't like that look, you could definitely just hide that wire by twining it or winding it around some branches or what have you. That look doesn't bother me. I think it just looks like little little fireflies fluttering around through the sky. But of course, if you don't like it, then definitely try to camouflage that wire. So I'm putting the lid in place and the lights are just going all over. And I have to say, I am so happy with how this turned out. Let me know what you think. I've got another one that I had done for the fall. I'll have that one linked down below for you. But yes, I love this so much. I have so many more ideas for you to check out right here. I want to thank you so much for joining me today. I had fun crafting with you. We'll see you in the next one. Take care. Bye.